Well, hello there. Today I'm only 5 minutes late, so I guess I'm improving a bit. As I say with every show, many times as I'm working from home, making phone calls, professional phone calls, it's sometimes hard to pull the brakes on the locomotive train and come to a complete stop before 5 p.m. Pacific time to do this live stream. But I do my best to be consistent about it. And I'm seeing here I'm only 5 minutes late. And so far, no one has joined, but I guess I can ramble for just a little bit here until I get one or two of my wonderful people here with me. I have some people who are loyal with me through thick and thin, and I'm very grateful to every one of you. Hope you're doing great. Right now, we are in the midst of another heat wave here in Los Angeles. We were given just like a little bit of a break, kind of like a tease for a few days where the weather actually started to cool off. And hey, Renee, how are you doing? Nice to have you here. The weather started cooling off just a bit, and it was a tease, and it was just, hey, Chris, and it was just enough to lull us into this place of complacency, like, oh, I can be comfortable again. I can breathe. I can feel like I'm living in civilized weather. And then, boom, back comes the heat and brought its sibling high humidity along with it. So it is sweltering hot right now, and it's supposed to get hotter later in the week. But I've certainly lived in Los Angeles long enough to know that September and October are usually the hottest months of the year here. In fact, mid-October, people forget this here in LA, but we always get a blistering heat wave, usually like 110 degrees, that kind of joyous weather. So I'm just running my air conditioning and watching the electric bill as it comes in each month. I'm living in LA. I don't spend a penny on heat. Never turn my heat on in the wintertime. Never need to. Plus, I'm happy when it's cool. But I more than make up for it in the summertime with perhaps hundreds of dollars for air conditioning and fans blowing around my apartment here. I apologize for the sound of one below me at my feet, but if I don't have that on, you will see sweat rolling off of me. See if some other people come in here to join, and try my best not to get product endorsement here. But I like the mug. I'm saying, hey, Andy, thank you for joining. How are you guys doing? Oh, good. You don't hear the fan. I'm glad. Well, trust me, that fan is right down below me, and it's almost every single broadcast I ever do, including the shows I do with Dr. Whimsy Anderson on Tuesday and Thursday, which are far more structured and serious than this show. And we strive to be very professional with that. And I guess, what's that, Andy? Does Sasha ever play with that fan? No, she knows better. She knows better than to stick her paw in the fan, though, where I've had trouble with her in the fall and winter when I like to light candles. I have caught my little Siamese princess taking her paw and trying to bat the flame of the candle. And there's a little part of me, it's like, well, maybe I should just let her find out for herself. And then there's another part of me, no, I don't want my cat getting burns, and I don't want to have to be rushing her off to the emergency room of the vet. So the only way I can have candles is to literally have it right in front of me and watch it. I can't even leave the room. Like, if I have to go to the bathroom, either blow out the candle or take the candle with me. I can never leave a candle unattended because of my cat. And those battery things, those little battery operated candles, just don't do it. It just doesn't have the same ambiance. But anybody who has cats knows that. Hi, Drops of Jupiter. Thank you for joining. Anybody who has had a cat knows we have to structure our lives around them. You have to second guess everything. Like when I put something on a shelf, I always have to think, okay, if this falls, will this break? if this falls, will this fall on top of something else and break that? Or will it fall and break that? Because I've had those kind of scenarios. Anybody who's had a cat has gone through that. Cats are very low maintenance pets for the most part. You don't have to walk them. You don't have to necessarily bathe them. You can leave them unattended for hours as long as they have food, water, and a litter box. I always said the easiest pet in the world, but there's always a trade-off. So I put up with it. Like I have 3 beautiful leather chairs here. Well, you'd never know they're leather chairs because I have them covered up in heavy Indian blankets to protect them from getting ripped and torn and scratched and destroyed, as cats will do. So let's see here. What Andy said, "Oh, Chuck, have you seen the movie Mr. Deeds? I just keep forgetting there's a great actor who plays Adam Sandler's father in it, Harv Presnell." I have never watched that movie because, that's a remake of a very famous classic film starring Gary Cooper, directed by Frank Capra, called Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. It's Gary Cooper and Jean Arthur. It's a masterpiece, and I just can't, for the life of me, imagine Adam Sandler ever coming close to topping the original. So I've never had any desire to watch it. I've always loved the original, and I just like to leave it there. In fact, Andy, I highly recommend Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. You should check it out yourself, see what you think of it. I love Harv in the movie where he sings They Call the Wind Mariah and Paint Your Wagon. Well, many, many, many years ago, I saw a touring company of the Broadway show Annie, and Harv played Daddy Warbucks. That was my first real introduction to him. And I know also I believe he was co-starred with Debbie Reynolds in the unsinkable Molly Brown. That's about the extent of my awareness of him. But I remember he sang beautifully as Daddy Warbucks. And let's see what else is going on right now. Did any of you guys watch the Emmy Awards last night? Pretty lackluster show. I thought they did much better last year when they had Eugene and Dan Levy, the father and son teaming. They hosted last year. It was just a far more entertaining and interesting show. You had a lot of heartfelt speeches. You had genuinely funny moments, laugh out loud moments. The guy hosting last night, it's just bland. It had very little presence. There wasn't much of interest in the speeches, and also I'm becoming increasingly aware of how little television I watch anymore. Used to be, as a kid, I was a television addict. I've told you that a lot of that was instilled into me because of my mother and father, who were television addicts. I was just literally raised on it. I've told on here where we would have the television on from start of the day with the Today Show on, and then I'd go off to school, or it'd be summer, I'd be home and watching, but we would start the day with the Today Show, and then there'd be the morning game shows, and then there'd be my mother's soap operas, and then after that, usually the time I'd come home from school would be reruns of classic shows like I Love Lucy, Gilligan's Island, I Dream of Jeannie, that type of thing, and then the news, and then, of course, primetime programming, and then we'd finish the day with the Tonight Show. I mean, literally, the television was on all day long, except for a few hours while we slept. And I'll admit some of that carried over into my adulthood, but I really broke the habit when I was in college. When I went away to college, I suddenly found I did not have time to sit and watch television, even though I had a little set in my dorm room. There was just no time. I had too much work to do. And I also had evening classes. So that broke the habit pretty quick. Though I did have one problem. I used to, because of my mother, one summer I got addicted to the soap opera Search for Tomorrow. And I'm dating myself there because that show went off the air in 1986. But I started watching it. I think this was when Morgan Fairchild was on the show. And there was an episode where she fell through a plate glass window. And of course, her beautiful face was all sliced up. And of course, she had to wear her hair and a Veronica Lake peekaboo to hide it until she could have cosmetic surgery to have her beauty restored again. But I got hooked on that show. And, I'd watch it and I'd come home from school, when I'd be home from school, I should say, or when I'd be home during the summer breaks. This was the era before VCRs and streaming. Oh, yeah. Renee, I remember Dark Shadows. I used to watch that too. I remember all the kids would come home for that. But anyway, to get to my point with college and television, I was with my school guidance counselor and we were planning out all my classes. And there was this one class very important class. I had to have it, but it was at 12:30 during the day. And I had a dilemma. And I didn't know how to tell this to my guidance counselor, but Search for Tomorrow came on at 12:30. I couldn't take that class. And he said, well, you've got to take this class. You've got to have this class to graduate. So I grudgingly had to take the class. I had to miss my soap opera for a whole semester. Oh, the horror of it. And I look back on times like that and I just think now I'm glad I don't let television rule my life anymore. I mean, I have this big 65-inch TV here that's maybe turned on twice a week. Television is just too much of an energy suck for me. I have too many art projects, writing projects, or I'm studying for Whimsy show. So I listen to a lot of news podcasts and I'm taking notes. So television it no longer holds the romance in my life that it once did, the hold. And I realized television can be quite a parasitic relationship. So hopefully I've broken it. But I was very aware of this last night. I was watching the Emmy Awards and I realized how very precious few of these shows or these actors I had ever seen. There were actors winning. I was like, who the hell are you? What did you do? Let's see. What are some other comments here? And I liked it better when Billy Crystal hosted. Oh, you're thinking of the Oscars. Billy Crystal, I don't think ever hosted the Emmys, but he did host the Oscars and did very, very well. Oh, yes, Andy, you just said that. I'm thinking of the Oscars. Yeah, Andy, I loved watching Days of Our Lives, but they moved it to Peacock, and I don't have the funds to get it. Actually, the Peacock network is only a few dollars a month. It's not that much money. You might want to consider it. Though I have too many streaming channels right now. As I just said, I watch very little TV. Sometimes I have the TV on twice a week, and yet I still subscribe to streaming channels. I need to drop a whole bunch of those. Just face reality. Hi, Valerie. Thank you for joining. I always love it when I see everybody saying hello to each other here. Yeah, Andy, it was Jonathan Frid. He became quite famous because of Dark Shadows. I have a friend who is quite devoted to Dark Shadows. I think he's gone to some of the Dark Shadows conventions. I don't know how many of those actors are still living. I know when Johnny Depp did the Dark Shadows movie, there was a cameo scene with several of the actors in it from the original series, which was cute. Let's see. I'm looking at some other comments here. And did Hugh Jackman and Neil Patrick Harris do Oscars or Emmys? Well, Neil Patrick Harris, I think he's hosted about everything. Emmys, Oscars, Tonys, what have you. Hugh Jackman, I think he only hosted the Oscars, which of course is considered far more prestigious. I know that Neil Patrick Harris had to campaign quite heavily to host the Oscars because, it's quite an odd thing. There are a lot of people who get offered the chance to host the Oscars and they want nothing to do with it. And then there are people who have to fight and fight and fight to prove their worthiness. to prove that they're prestigious enough to host the Oscars. And that was the situation with Neil Patrick Harris. But, you know, the person I always thought should have hosted the Oscars was Bette Midler. I always thought Bette Midler could have just taken that show and put it under her arm and walked off with it. She would have owned the night. You know, I've seen Bette perform several times in concert, and the woman is masterful on stage, a wonderful comedian, a great presence and great timing, very good at thinking on her feet, which an Oscar host has to do. And one of the clients I used to have when I was in the health industry was the wonderful producer Craig Zadan. You know, you may have heard Neil. Let's see, Neil Merrick, I think, was his producing partner, and Craig Zadan, Neil Marin, and Craig Zadan. But I used to talk to Craig Zadan, and for 3 years, they produced the Oscars. And I thought, well, here's my one chance to have the ear of the producer of the Oscars and to actually make a suggestion to him. And I said, have you ever considered Bette Midler for hosting the show? And he said, yes, I have. In fact, I tried. I fought to get Bette Midler to host the Oscars. I fought. And the problem was ABC, the network that carried the Oscars. And, you know, I don't know how much you know of this, but here in the show business industry, a lot of it is based on demographics appeal. And he said ABC rejected Bette Midler. They said, quote unquote, she was too old. Bette Midler was too old. She did not appeal to a younger demographic, and that's why they did not want her. And of course, Craig Zadan thought that was just absurd. I thought it was absurd also, but that's the reason you never saw Bette Midler host the Oscars, and I think that's such a loss. She would have been perfect. Let's see. Check. Do you remember when Billy Crystal, when he did the Oscars, he did scenes from movies where he was in it, and he also did a skit where he could sense what the celebrities were thinking? Oh, vaguely I do. I think he hosted 8 times altogether, and I remember him doing little special effects things where he would put himself into the movies. I don't think he's the only one who's ever done that. Billy Crystal in his prime was quite clever. Yes, it is Quiet Without Ward and Joyce and Pam. Well, I'm just grateful to have you guys here. It's always wonderful, you know, and I get a lot of people who watch me later in the week after the show is archived. Yeah, Valerie. Yeah, you agree. That it's awful, Chuck. Bette Midler is amazing. I don't know what Bette Midler's own feelings were about it. Craig didn't say if he had actually approached her. I was guessing he had, but he did agree with me very much that she would have been the perfect Oscar host. Oh yeah, I remember that, Andy, when he dressed up as Hannibal Lecter and they brought him out on a dolly. You know, I remember that. Oh yeah, when he actually went up to Anthony Hopkins in the audience, who was seated near the front, as they do with a lot of the major nominees. That was a cute moment. Anthony Hopkins, such a special actor. I saw him on stage in London. I think it was 1989, and it was the play M. Butterfly. And of course, this was before he had won his Oscar, before he had really achieved his big movie stardom. But I knew I was in the presence of greatness. I believe that was, I used to love to go to London a lot. I haven't been in years, but one of the reasons I loved to go to London was for the West End Theater. I don't know what it's like right now, but it used to be extremely affordable, a lot more affordable than Broadway tickets, and it was a lot easier to get into shows. So, but I remember that 89, I saw Anthony Hopkins on stage, I was going to say the same year, but no, I realize now it was a couple years before that. I saw the great Maggie Smith in the play Lettuce and Lovage. And that was a play. When I saw it, she was still in previews. So I was one of the very first people to ever see it, fall of 1987. And she played it in London and the West End for quite a while, and then took it across the pond to Broadway, where she won a Best Actress Tony. And on YouTube, they've got a clip of the 1990 Tony Awards where they typically perform scenes from the nominated plays, and there's like a 5-minute scene from the play, and that's like my special souvenir of the show, because the whole show was not recorded in its entirety, which is the tragedy of a lot of theater, that it's lost forever. There was a famous actor in the 1800s, his name escapes me, but he said acting on stage is like sculpting in snow. It's there for just a little bit, and then it melts and it's gone forever, other than the memory. And that's many times what it's like for stage performances. I've heard that a lot of shows are archived. Broadway shows are recorded and archived, but they're kept. If I'd known I was going to talk about this, I would have researched it. I think it's Lincoln Center. They have a research library, but it's not open to the general public. You have to have special permission or a valid reason, like you're a researcher or something, that you can go and watch these shows. But there are archived digital video recordings of a number of Broadway shows, and I'm not sure how far back they go. And I know there are sometimes illegally recorded shows. I see the DVDs sometimes pop up on eBay and so forth, for sale, where people have actually taken their phones and recorded an entire show, which I don't know how they get away with that, but they've done it. They're extremely primitive. It's not the best vantage point to watch a show, but sometimes it's all you have. And I've done that a few times. If it's been a Broadway show I've really, really wanted to see, and I've known the likelihood of the touring company ever coming out here, it's very small, and I certainly won't make it to New York to see the show before it's over. And so I've done it. Andy, I saw that Polly Holiday passed. She was a great actress. Speaking of Broadway, a lot of Broadway credits. She was one of those people who got, had been working for years and years and just became a household name at the age of 39 when she was brought out to Los Angeles to do a little sitcom called Alice. And she just stole the show. She was marvelous. And it's hard to think. It was pointed out the other day on Facebook that the entire original cast of that show is now dead. Everybody is gone. Even the kid who played Tommy, he died a few years ago. Vera, Mel, Al, Linda Lavin, she just died last year. They're all gone now. Linda Lavin, I met her once. I never had the pleasure of meeting Polly Holiday, but I did meet Linda Lavin once. Lovely, lovely soul, just sweet as could be, everything that you would hope her to be. And she told me, she was out here because she was going to try to do a new sitcom. I mean, this was like 20 years ago. I don't even remember what the show was. I don't think it lasted very long, but that's why she was here. But she said that she and her husband lived in Wilmington, North Carolina. And of course, I came from a little town in Virginia, and she was asking me where. And I said, "Oh, you've never heard of it?" And she said, "No, Desi, tell me, where is it?" And I told her, and she said, "I know where that is. I've been through there. I've taken a lot of road trips through Virginia and through the country. I've been through your little hometown." So I told some people back in my hometown, and like, "Wow, you mean Alice was here?" Yeah, Alice was here. In fact, there was another celebrity in my hometown back in the 1930s, Amelia Earhart. And this story came from my 5th grade teacher. And my 5th grade teacher was not a woman who would embellish, make up stories. She said it was so. Now, granted, that 5th grade teacher was not one of my favorite people in the world, but that's a whole other story. But she was telling us back when she was in college. This was back in the 30s. She was back in college, and she had her suitcase with her, and she had a 4-mile walk to the bus station to go back to college. And she went into the drugstore to get a Coke at the counter, and outside the drugstore was this enormous convertible, just gorgeous car. Some reason I want to say a Duesenberg, but I know it wasn't a Duesenberg, but it was that type of car. It was obviously a rich person's car. It was quite grand, beautiful convertible parked outside. And she went to the soda counter to get a Coke. Remember the days when drugstores used to have soda counters, with ice cream and milkshakes and all that. And sitting there was this rather distinguished looking woman, and my teacher recognized her. It was Amelia Earhart. And Amelia Earhart was just, I guess, kind of like Linda Lavin, just on a little road trip, driving through the countryside, the state, and exploring. And she stopped at our little town to get a little refreshment or something. And she saw my teacher with her suitcase and said, "Well, where are you going?" And she said, "Well, I'm just walking to my bus stop." And Amelia heard how far it was. She said, "Oh, get in my car. I'll give you a ride." So Amelia Earhart gave her a ride to the bus stop. So that was the other celebrity who just happened to be driving through my little hometown. Oh, that's right. I did tell the story of Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor came to my hometown when she was campaigning for her husband, John Warner, for the state Senate. She was on a tour bus going from town to town to town. I didn't get to see her because I was away at college, but my mother sure did. And my mother was like, "Wow, her eyes really are violet. They're really violet. They're beautiful." I looked at her eyes. That was the biggest thing ever to happen to my little town. Let's see, what are some other comments here? Chris, did I ever meet Terry Garr? I never met her, but Chris, I don't know if you remember Hugo's restaurant in West Hollywood. I was in there one morning, and Terry Garr was sitting at a table about 2 tables across from me, but I didn't get up to bother her or anything, talk to her. But that was my one and only encounter with her. And talk about a great talent. Wait, Andy, what was this? This was before she went missing, or did she go missing in your hometown? No, this was before Amelia Earhart went missing. She was still very much present at that time. Hey, Kelly, thank you for joining. Jim, thank you for joining. Let's see. 3 celebrities came to my hometown so far: Butch Patrick from the Munsters, Larry Wilcox, and Robert Pine from Chips. That's not so bad. Oh, Butch Patrick. I think I met him once at one of the Hollywood memorabilia shows. He was there, and I think it was Pat Priest who played Marilyn. There were 2 actresses who played Marilyn on the show, and I think it was Pat Priest. She was there, and Butch Patrick. And I think Butch right now is the only surviving cast member. I think Pat may have passed away, and of course I know the other cast members are gone. And I mentioned, I had a very good friend. She used to date the grandson. No, pardon me. The son, not the grandson, the son of Al Lewis, who played Grandpa Munster, hence the grand. That's why that slipped out. And I was shocked to see how young he was. And he said, "Oh yeah, everybody gives me that because see, Al Lewis was only in his 40s when he did the Munsters. They made him up to look old for the characters. People just assumed he was an old man when he did the show, hence his young son." But anyway, I had a fun evening with my friend and the son, just talking about the Munsters and hearing a lot of the inside stuff, because when he was a kid, he used to go visit the set all the time. And one of the things he said to me, "Oh, Yvonne de Carlo, diva." She ruled the set like, "I'm the movie star. I'm the diva." But he liked her. He said she very much had that presence. Let's see here. And you said I didn't see the message about your mom. I'm so sorry. It's hard for me to talk and read all these. Let me scroll back here. Okay. Oh, Andy, I am so sorry. Your mother has shingles on her tailbone. Oh, I'm terribly, terribly sorry. And I know how painful that shingles anywhere is painful. I hope she'll be better. I hope she's getting proper medical treatment. I don't know what they can do with antiviral medications. I once had shingles right here, my forehead, and my upper temple here. Only I had the kind that wasn't painful, because a lot of it has to do with which nerve path it travels up. And I was lucky there. I had no pain, but I did have the outbreak. And here's where I was not lucky. It went down, and I've told the story before on here. It almost touched my optic nerve, and I was a hair's breadth away from being blinded in this eye. We caught it just in time, but I know they had to put me on heavy antiviral medication to get it under control. So I don't know what form of treatment your mother is getting. Because I was in the health industry, I can recommend a couple of natural supplements to you. The amino acid lysine, 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 taken on an empty stomach 3 times a day, can be helpful as a preventative and for treating. And there's also a supplement called red marine algae. Now remember that, red marine algae. It has its own properties that seems to work quite well with shingles outbreaks. And also you can get lysine topical cream. So it might help to lessen some of the severity and help her with some of her pain. And I certainly hope your mother is doing better. I'm sorry I didn't see your message there. Let's see. Okay, Pat, Priest is still living. It's the other Marilyn that passed away. Pat is 89. Well, that doesn't surprise me, because the Munsters premiered over 60 years ago. Premiered 1964. And what's amazing about the Munsters, it only lasted 2 seasons, but yet there were enough episodes for it to be in syndication, and it's played ever since. It's a classic. And you said, I don't know what's worse, shingles or psoriasis. They're both bad, but I think shingles probably is going to be more painful. Psoriasis responds really well to essential fatty acid supplements like omega-3 capsules, flax oil capsules, taking really high doses of that. Vitamin E taken internally, also vitamin E cream applied externally can be helpful. Just another suggestion for you there. Psoriasis can be a lifetime affliction. A lot of psoriasis is also allergy related. There are different causes to it. It's an inflammation in the body. But anyway, I'm so sorry about that. Yes, Jem, that's true. Just 2 seasons for the Munsters. And you may not know this, but the pilot for the Munsters was filmed in color. It was originally intended to be in color. But it was an artistic decision. They wanted it to look like those old Universal horror movies. So that's where they immediately went back to black and white, even though 1964, that period, 64, 65, 66 was the big transitional period where black and white shows were switching over to color. And if you've ever seen color photographs of the actors in their makeup, it was a greenish sort of a greenish grayish color. They were very colorful to be just photographed in black and white. And of course, there was a Munsters movie at the end of the run where it was filmed in color. Oh, Cassie, you just found Whimsy's channel. Yes, the Oracle of Whimsy. Please check it out. I'm on there now twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Really different from this. This show, I just keep it extremely free form and loose and just have fun with you guys. Her show, far more structured, disciplined. I have to spend the day doing my homework, studying my news, really being on my toes when I do that show. But I love working with Dr. Whimsy. We have a great friendship going back about 11. I think it's about 11 years. We used to work together in the health industry. She was our resident naturopathic doctor, and I was the resident nutritionist. And then Whimsy took me under her wing and trained me in naturopathic medicine. And I look at this as one of her greatest achievements, that she could take a dunce like me and get me to where I could actually get my license and as a naturopathic doctor's assistant. I don't really practice anymore, but I am licensed, and it does come in handy when we talk on the show, and sometimes topics do come up around medicine. Like we've been, I swear to God, I'm not trying to get into politics here. I really strive to keep politics off this show, but we do talk a lot about Trump on that show. How can we not? And his health has been a big issue. And so Whimsy and I do take our expertise and apply that to our conversations and what we think may be going on with him. But let me get back to some comments here. Cassie Lake, nice to see you, Chuck. Hello from Canada. Well, hi, Cassie. I have several friends in Canada. I love all of you, and I thank you for joining. Let's see here. That's a long ding there. Yes, unfortunately, even though I tell people not to call me during the show or send me messages, they do it anyway. And some reason I can't seem to disengage that on my computer here. So I apologize for the occasional dings. I guess I could say, oh, yes, every time you hear a ding, an angel gets its wings. I don't know. But anyway, I'm just mentioning about Whimsy's show. I'm proud of my work on that show. I work hard to be on that show. Not to be on the show, but to work on that show, to be able to not be a deer in the headlights, to be able to talk with at least some proficiency about the different topics. It's also a different format. See, Whimsy has always been very good about taking me out of my comfort zones. Hi, Joyce. Thanks for joining. She's always, a whole 11 years I've known her, she's always been about taking me out of my comfort zones, showing me that I can do a lot more than I think I can do, such as getting my license as a naturopathic doctor's assistant, doing YouTube live shows. I wouldn't be doing this show, frankly, if it were not for Dr. Whimsy. She coerced me into doing her show. I was begging, pleading, Whimsy, I can't go on live. I cannot do this. Oh, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And then she wanted me to come on there and do something that I certainly don't do on this show. But when we used to work together, we formed a great friendship. And Whimsy is a gifted psychic, tarot reader, heart-centered remote viewing. And I just started talking to her about some of my own experiences and what I channel and predict and so forth. I've never made a big deal of that. And she said, oh, you've got to do this live on the show. I was like, Whimsy, no, not happening. Because I just figure people think I'm a nut, I'm insane, I'm crazy, what have you. No, I haven't had that at all. The response has been quite positive. And I look forward to doing it on her show now. I may one day do it on this show, but I just keep this show more about what I originally set it out to be, just about show business stories, old Hollywood happenings here in Los Angeles. talking with you guys. It's just taken on its own life. But Cassie, thank you for your great compliment there. That is something I love to do. I'm going to have a message either tomorrow or Thursday on Whimsy Show, and I haven't decided which one I'm going to use because I have two different messages that I've channeled. Let's see here. Looking at some comments here. But getting back, I guess, to show business related stories, I was talking about the Emmys last night. And, well, first of all, my friend Anastasia, I'm sure you'll be watching her live stream after I get off the air. A lot of you are wonderful about going over to her show, and she appreciates that very much. And I want you to know I appreciate it because she's a very dear friend of mine. She's gone through some rough times in the last 3 to 4 months, and doing these live streams has gone a long way to helping to rebuild her self-esteem. And I love that she's growing and she's evolving, and she is getting her own following right now. I'm happy about that. But anyway, one of the things she and I love to do is channel our inner Joan Rivers, especially during award shows, especially during the red carpet. Joan isn't here anymore, so we try to be her mouthpieces. And Anastasia and I couldn't get together last night, but I was watching the Emmys and I was just taking little screenshots of some of the god-awful couture and making snarky little comments and sending them to her so she could make her own snarky little comments and send them back. And there was one year she and I did a live stream together. We thought, isn't this going to be cute? We're going to put the red carpet on the big screen TV here in my apartment right behind us. We're going to put 2 chairs in front of it, and we're going to comment on the clothes live just like Joan Rivers did. Only problem, I didn't know YouTube did this. I'm sure it has to do with copyright laws, restrictions. Even though the TV screen was showing up on my computer, on my camera, on YouTube, it was blacked out, completely blacked out. And so we had to make an emergency switch around. I thought, well, we can't do the show like this with a black screen behind us. We can't even see what we're commenting on. So we had to go off the air for a few minutes, set everything back up again, rearrange the lights and everything, and then put the red carpet commentary on to the side outside of camera where we could watch it, and then make our snarky bitchy little Joan Rivers comments about the clothes. But it was still fun. Let's see. Oh yeah, Andy, thank you. It was Beverly Owen who played the other Marilyn. But anyway, I was watching the Emmys last night, and I was saying that was one of the things I was doing, was taking pictures of some of the clothes. Like, there was just some pieces where I've always theorized that a lot of the stylists and designers for these stars are playing practical jokes on them, sending them out there purposely, knowing how bad they look. Like, trust me, darling. Trust me, this skirt made out of hefty cinch sack trash bags will look fabulous on you. Trust me on this. Okay, I think there's a way to transfer your live stream to Anastasia's. I've seen other YouTubers do it. Not sure how to. I can assure you, I don't know how to do it. I am not technically proficient with this. It's a miracle that I can even get this thing up and running so I can talk to you right now. So I don't know if I'm going to try that. Chris, have you ever met Nolan Miller? Yes. No, I never met Bob Mackey, but Nolan Miller, I loved. Nolan Miller was the sweetest man. Very sweet, very unpretentious, kind, but wonderful poise, grace, always willing to talk to me about the people he designed for. Thought the world of Nolan Miller. Bob Mackey, he'd be fun to meet. But no, I never encountered. And of course, I'd love to talk to him about Carol Burnett and Cher. Oh, yes, darling, you look great in this great triple ply toilet paper dress. Oh, please don't give the designers ideas. They just might try that. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Nolan Miller, he did some amazing things. And, of course, Nolan Miller, I think his greatest claim to fame was designing for Joan Collins and Linda Evans on Dynasty. Those clothes became iconic. And I also know that on the same studio lot, Lucille Ball was doing her final series, Life with Lucy. That was the one that they filmed 13 episodes, and sadly only 8 ever aired. And I was in the audience for one of those episodes for the filming. I was in the audience for the episode where John Ritter guest starred. I always love when I watch that episode, like on DVD or YouTube, and I know that my laughter is part of that audience. That was a happy time for me. But anyway, Nolan Miller would be on the Dynasty set designing for them, and then he'd go over to the Lucy set because there was an episode where Lucy needed a very special dress. Her character was going out on a date with Peter Graves, was the guest star. And so it was a beautiful pink dress that Nolan Miller made for her. And he was telling me they had to make the dress very hurriedly, and there wasn't time to finish sewing it. He had to actually take duct tape on the inside of the dress and staples and pins and fit it on her. And it looked great if you watch the episode, but he said that dress was literally being held together with duct tape and staples and pins. Let's see. What was this, Joyce? I want to try what Whimsy uses. What is it you're referring to, Joyce? I think I missed a comment here. This is not letting me go back. Joyce, I don't know what you're referring to when you say you want to try what Whimsy uses. If you mean how good Whimsy looks, Whimsy practices what she preaches. She's being a naturopathic doctor. She eats extremely healthy. She adheres to a diet that's 80% plant-based and 20% or less meat. And she's also eliminated a lot of refined sugar. She takes a lot of herbal supplements. She looks wonderful, really wonderful. That's her great secret, which is not really a secret. On her Sunday show, she talks a lot about health and diet. And I know as her real life assistant, I talk to a lot of her patients, and I follow up with them. I get to see for myself the results of the diets that she puts people on. She does miracles. Kelly talking, I saw it in a window and couldn't resist. Oh yeah, you're talking about Carol Burnett's Scarlett O'Hara dress. In fact, that moment got, I think, the longest laugh in the history of the 11-year run of the Carol Burnett show. And Carol Burnett fully credited Bob Mackie. She said, I didn't do anything. That was Bob Mackie who got that laugh. And it was ingenious, the curtain rod dress. Once I went to I've met Carol Burnett 3 times. One of them was a book signing. And some woman came in a replica of that dress, complete with the curtain rod, like sticking out about 2-3 feet in each direction of herself. It was quite cute. And Carol Burnett, of course, got a great laugh out of it. That is true. Bob Mackie also designed for Cher. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but Cher and Carol Burnett both, at least at the time of the 70s, both wore a size 4 dress. They had very similar measurements, wore the same size. So they were constantly borrowing from each other's closets. Many times Cher would wear one of Carol Burnett's gowns or vice versa. Or when they would do comic characterizations, they would borrow costumes, and maybe Bob Mackie would make little tweaks and changes here and there. But It certainly helped save a lot of money for both of the shows that way. And it also made it easier for Bob Mackey, because Bob Mackey, I know for the Carol Burnett show alone, because remember, he had to design for the dancers also, all the extras, everybody. So he typically had to do about 124 costumes a week. And then he took on Cher's variety show as well. Well, originally it was the Sonny and Cher show, and then it became, after the divorce, it became the Cher show. I'm thinking of a funny story there Cher told on the Today Show. She was supposed to be bleeped, but she said the F word on the Today Show. And she asked for permission. She said, okay, to tell this story, you will bleep me. And it was when she was divorcing Sonny, and she was in the big dilemma because she and Sonny had a hit television show that was going to have to go off the air if they divorced. And Cher was very close with Lucille Ball, and she called up Lucy and said, Lucy, you're the only human being in the world who's gone through what I'm going through right now. Referring to, of course, Lucy's marriage to Desi and their show, I Love Lucy, and how it was intertwined. She said, you're the only person in the world, and I don't know what to do. What do I do? And Lucy said, and I'm going to clean up my language here, but Lucy, according to Cher, Lucy said, oh, F dash Sonny, you're the one who has the talent. So Cher told that story, and to Hoda Kotb's horror, it wasn't bleeped, and the F dash word went out live. So anyway, that's a little story there that ties in. Oh, Joyce, don't apologize for being late. I'm just happy to have you here. Oh, Joyce, StreamYard. Okay, that's what you were referring to. Yeah, I don't entirely understand how StreamYard works itself. I would be better off with that too. Maybe I can get more information for both of us for StreamYard, because it does seem to be superior on there. Like when Whimsy and I are taking comments here, she can make it appear in big type on the front of the screen, which I would love to be able to do here. You see me struggling with this from time to time. Liz, Andy sure is quiet where you are. Chuck without a special cat cameo. Yeah, I don't know where Sasha is right now. She makes her guest appearances when she pleases. I have little to no say about it. Yes, Andy, that's correct. They did not bleep the F word. Mama's Family would make fun group Halloween costume. I saw something funny the other day. It was two men in drag as Eunice and Mama, and it was about the two of the best costumes I've ever seen. They got the wigs exactly like the dresses, everything. Obviously, they had everything custom made for them. I wish I had a picture of it that I could show here. Those skets were incredible. Vicki Lawrence, I always thought, was a truly underrated actress and comedic performer. I mean, to this day, I don't think she's ever gotten the due that she deserved. I was watching a clip the other day, and I vaguely remembered this when it originally aired, but it was Mama's Family, where it was a flashback. It was a flashback to when Eunice and Ellen and Vince were children, and Mama was a young woman in her 30s. And of course, it was Vicki Lawrence, who really was young, who really was in her 30s at the time. And it was the way she played Mama. She approached it like a serious actress. She believably played Mama as a young woman. And it was Mama before she had become embittered by life, when she still was very sweet and loving and really trying to be a good mother to the children. And you saw even as an 8-year-old, what an impossible kid Eunice was. And that they had this wonderful little girl cast to play baby Eunice. Oh, it was so well done. I wish I had a recording of that show. But Mama was Vicky's masterpiece. And when you consider Vicki Lawrence was only in her 20s when she did that show, when she did the Carol Burnett show, and when you watch Mama, it's very minimal. There's no makeup. I think Vicki Lawrence said all she did was just take her own makeup off and then put on glasses and the wig, a little bit of padding, and you believed her. You believed that she was this old woman, this old mama. She just nailed it. And I came from a little southern town in Virginia, and I knew women exactly like that. Vicki Lawrence grew up in Southern California. I don't know where she got that from. She was just channeling it. But it is her masterpiece. And I remember even Lucille Ball once commented on it, how masterful it was. And of course, Vicki Lawrence to this day tours the country doing a one-woman show as Mama. And of course, now Vicki Lawrence is in her 70s. She kind of grew into the role. She's the same age as Mama now. Yeah. Oh, Jim, you remember that little girl nailed being Eunice? Oh, yeah. She was just perfect. Just perfect. No, and not just the wig. It was the whole attitude. She just had Eunice nailed. What was that, Andy? It was a parade of ropers or something. What was that? Oh, let's see here. Where's some other comments here? I need a refill on my plate of spaghetti, meat sauce, and meatballs. Oh, I could go for that right now myself. I love spaghetti. Oh, it's one of my favorite foods ever since I was a kid. But I was working today, and as usual, I don't have time to really prepare for this show. Because I've learned it serves me well just to go on here free form and just go wherever you guys want to take it. But I always like to have at least one or two topics, kind of like a little card in the back pocket in case there's nothing to talk about. And of course, last night on the Emmy Awards, they did a tribute to the Golden Girls. The Golden Girls last night celebrated its 40th anniversary. It premiered on September 14th, 1985. And I still remember watching that. You know, I had just moved to Los Angeles, just set up my apartment. It was all new. And like 2 weeks later, this incredible show premiered. And I just loved it from the first episode on. I knew I was watching a classic. And the one that really stood out for me, I always loved B. Arthur from Maude. I love Betty White from the Mary Tyler Moore. Sue Ann Nivens, I thought that was her masterpiece. And of course, Rue McClanahan, wonderful in Maude also. But I thought the revelation was Estelle Getty. The little, I just thought, who is this little old lady? Her timing is impeccable. Her delivery. I mean, I thought she just upstaged the other three actresses. And she was the one who stood out, even though she was always considered the supporting player. Sometimes I thought she was the actual star of the show. And it wasn't long after that I saw an interview with Estelle Getty. This was like 3 weeks after the show premiered. And of course, I just assumed they had an actual 80-year-old woman playing the role. No, Estelle Getty was actually the youngest cast member. I think she was like a year younger or something than any of the other cast members on the show. Or no, wait. I may have that wrong. Maybe Rue McClanahan was younger, but she was definitely younger than B. Arthur, who played her daughter, and Betty White. And I saw this really attractive woman. She had brunette hair and had her makeup done. She's very, very nice looking. And she didn't talk like Sophia. She had a nice, refined voice. I thought, this woman is incredible. What an actress. And then I started looking her up, and I saw, she had an extensive background on the Broadway stage, and she was brought out here to do this series. And she wasn't even supposed to be. What was this? Jim said, I think only Rue was younger than the show. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, I just realized after I said that Rue McClanahan was the youngest, but Estelle definitely younger than Betty and B. But I was just really taken with her right from the very first show. So I was surprised when I saw an interview with her in print a few years later, where Estelle Getty admitted she was extremely insecure working with those other actresses. Because these were, Betty White, B. Arthur, even Rue, they were established from their series. And Estelle was always like, who am I? I'm just this little nobody actress. Can I keep up with these people? And then the thing that really surprised me, she said, all those years I did the show, I kept thinking people were going to find out what a fraud I was, that I really wasn't that good. And I thought, what ironic words, because she was anything but a fraud. She really held that show together. So it's fun to watch. Well, for all of them. But I find more and more Estelle Getty is my favorite character on there. And it is true, they did not get along. We have scores of shows where actors did not get along. Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams, they didn't get along very well, but yet they worked together beautifully. We've all heard the stories about Bill Frawley and Vivian Vance, all their problems behind the scenes, but yet they worked together beautifully on camera. And that was certainly the case with the four on the Golden Girls. But there were a lot of problems. And B. Arthur particularly had problems with Betty White. Just apparently did not like her. There was a lot of animosity there. But I understand from Rue that there were times where B was considering leaving the show long before she actually did, because she was just tired of all of the rest on the show and so forth. And Rue took her aside and said, B, you don't have to love us. Just love what we're creating. Love the art that we are making, this fabulous show we are doing together. Love that. And so I guess B held to that. But one of the reasons I know they didn't get along too well is because I talked to Rue McClanahan once. She was a good friend of the building manager of the apartment building I was living in West Hollywood for many years. And Rue McClanahan used to come over to visit, and she was often their dinner guest. And I got to meet her, talk to her, and I felt, I'm always careful with celebrities, not to get too personal, but it felt safe enough to ask her, is it true? Did you get along on the show? And she said, no. According to Rue, she said, none of us did. We didn't get along. Now, this was years after the show was on, so I don't know. Maybe this was something that happened later in the run or something, but according to her, they did not get along. Those were her own words. Tell me something else about Betty White, but I don't think I'm going to repeat it here. It's a little too personal, and I don't want to violate her, but I think it's okay to say that much. They didn't get along, but they certainly worked beautifully together. And I never got to see a filming of, or I should say a taping of The Golden Girls. But you may recall there was a sequel series after B. Arthur left the show. And it only lasted one season, called The Golden Palace. And that was where the other three women invested in a hotel in Miami. And you can see that on Hulu. They have The Golden Girls and The Golden Palace. And I did sit in the audience for that one. Anyway, my sister, who lives in Colorado, came out here for a visit. And she really, really wanted to go. And I had a friend with some connections who was able to get us tickets. And it was intriguing, because I had been forewarned Estelle is really bad about forgetting her lines, and they have to stop the production a lot, and they have to get her back up to speed again. She flubs lines all the time, and I was warned about that. Well, I sat in the audience, and let me tell you, Estelle Getty did not make one single mistake. She was letter perfect. Guess who made the mistakes? It was Betty White and Rue McClanahan. They were the ones who flubbed their lines several times. Not too much, but I thought that was a little amusing. After I had been warned about that. And of course, it did later come out that Estelle Getty had Alzheimer's. And she may have been having some symptoms of that, because I understand there were times where she would mess up her lines. In fact, there's a very funny blooper reel. It makes the rounds on social media, and it's Estelle Getty in mid-scene blowing a line and going, shit. And then B. Arthur's like, because it was so out of character coming out of Sophia's mouth. Though I don't know, maybe it wasn't character for Sophia. You just couldn't have that on network TV. And the Betty White bloopers. Yeah, there are those too. And of course, that was supposedly among the things that drove B. Arthur crazy, because Betty White, between scenes, would break the fourth wall and talk to the studio audience. And she did that a lot. And B. Arthur hated that. B. Arthur, I think, coming from more of a theater background, you never broke the fourth wall. You did not break character in front of the audience. And of course, Betty was notorious for it. And of course, it also endeared the audience more to Betty, I think. And maybe there might have been a little bit of jealousy from B. But I understand that B and Betty were the ones who really had the problems with each other. My friend Bart Andrews, he wrote the I Love Lucy book, which had 28 printings. But he also was a literary agent, one of the top literary agents in the country. And he represented Betty White for a couple of her books, and he got to become a good friend of hers. And I asked him about Betty, and he said, well, I love Betty, but let's put it this way. She's a lot more like Sue Ann Nivens than she is Rose Nyland. She's basically Sue Ann Nivens. She was playing herself when she did that character. He said the big difference between Sue Ann Nivens and Betty White, Sue Ann Nivens could cook. He said Betty White never learned to cook. And he was pointing out to me, like, there was an episode where she was holding a spatula or some cooking utensil. And he said, look at her. She doesn't even know how to hold it right. It's so foreign to her. Where's some comments here? Oh my gosh, the Mary Tyler Moore bloopers. I don't know if I've seen her Mary Tyler Moore bloopers. I've seen her Golden Girls bloopers, but she was so good on that show as Sue Ann Nivens. And I think what made the Sue Ann Nivens character all the more effective, people have forgotten this now, but up until about 1974, I think that's when 74, 75, she first started doing the character. She came in, I think they brought her in the fourth season of the show. It was after Valerie Harper had left. And then after Cloris Leachman left to do her own show, that's where they really beefed up the Sue Ann Nivens character as a replacement. But up until that point, Betty White had this ultra wholesome image, almost like Julie Andrews, wholesome, sugary, sweet. And so to have her playing this conniving, sociopathic bitch, it was so against Betty White's image, and that's what made it just so deliciously fun to watch. It's like every week she was trashing her own image. And of course, she and Mary Tyler Moore were close friends in real life. And when it came time for the casting of the Sue Ann Nivens character, it was even in the script. A little side note, we want a Betty White type for this role. And so they were auditioning all of these actresses looking for a Betty White type. And it was like someone said, why aren't we just going to Betty White herself? And it turned out they didn't approach Betty White because she was a good friend of Mary's. And I thought, well, what if they have problems working together and stuff? And so they didn't go. They went to Mary. Mary said, oh, come on. Come on. I think that's a great idea. Let's get Betty White. And that's how it happened. And Joyce, that's a good point you made. B. Arthur and Betty White seemed like they were competing. They were. I think that's another reason for the strife between them. You had two old guard pros, two legends. You know, Rue McClanahan wasn't quite in that league. I think Rue McClanahan grew into that league because of the Golden Girls. She very much became their equal. But in the beginning, Rue McClanahan was mostly known for supporting roles like on Maude. But Betty White and B. Arthur were they were established. And so I think maybe it was like two really competitive women on the show, like who's going to get the most laughs, who's going to be the standout star on this show. I remember the first season of the show, you know, they were all nominated for Emmys. And of course, Betty and B and Rue were all in the Best Actress category. Estelle, they put her in supporting. But those three women were all competing. And I remember this when they opened the envelope and it was Betty White who won. And you know how they show on camera the other nominees? B. Arthur was not happy. And I think they even cut away to her. You could see a little disdain on her face that she had just lost the Emmy to Betty White. And of course, you know, what's the other thing that's interesting about the Golden Girls, and this is the only time this has ever happened, all three of those women won Emmys. The next year, Rue got the Best Actress Emmy, and then the third year, B. Arthur won the Emmy, and the same year, Estelle Getty won her first Emmy. She's the one who got 2 Emmys for that show in the supporting category, but the entire cast won. And there's a wonderful photograph of all of them standing together holding their Emmys. And boy, they deserve them. And the Golden Girls also, for a couple of years in a row, won the Best Comedy Series Emmy. So I'm having fun. Last night after the Emmys, I put on Hulu and I just watched a bunch of Golden Girls episodes in honor of the 40th anniversary. And you realize the plethora of television shows that come and go. There's only really a small handful that ever become true perennial classics, you know, like I Love Lucy, Star Trek, that caliber. And I think Golden Girls is definitely in there. Andy, didn't Betty White's character have a thing for Ted Knight's character? Actually, it was Ed Asner's Lou Grant character that Betty White had the hots for. And there was a marvelous episode. I think it was one of the best episodes ever, the Mary Tyler Moore Show. I think it won Emmys for its writing, directing. Mary got an Emmy for it. Ed Asner got an Emmy for it. I think Betty did too. It was an episode where they mixed comedy and drama, and it was where the comedy was just like laugh out, like scream out loud laughing, and then the drama was like you wanted to cry. It actually brought you to tears. It was just a masterfully done episode, and it was the one where Lou had too much to drink and he ended up spending the night with Sue Ann. And Lou tells his dark little secret to Mary and makes her swear she will not tell a soul. And anyway, Mary lets it slip out to Murray. And then Lou finds out. And then the last part of the show, it's Lou being very icy cold to Mary. This is where they played it for the drama. And he said, Mary, I respect you as my employee, but we are not friends anymore. I can't be your friend. You betrayed me. And Mary is crying over it. And Lou, he's icy cold to her. And finally, Mary breaks him down. But it's just a well-crafted episode I think it was in the 6th season of the show. Well, wait, anyway, weren't there differences between Betty Davis and Joan Crawford? That we could do a 3-hour show on. There, where do I even begin other than to say, yes, Betty Davis and Joan Crawford had big issues with each other. I'll maybe on another show because we're at 6:20 now, and I don't know how much longer I can be on. But if you really want to get into it, there was an 8-part Ryan Murphy miniseries called Feud that starred Susan Sarandon as Betty Davis and Jessica Lange as Joan Crawford. It goes into it in considerable detail, but how did it start? Well, now some of it may be hearsay and bad rumors, but supposedly it goes back to the 1930s when both actresses were in love with the actor Franchot Tone. Both actresses had affairs with Franchot Tone. Only Joan went on to marry Franchot Tone, much to Betty's chagrin. And I always love to look back on it as the period where her name was Joan Tone. But anyway, supposedly Betty never got over the fact that she had lost Franchot to Joan. And then there are other stories, and this is where I'm not sure if it's entirely true, but I will touch upon it. In the 1940s, Betty Davis, of course, was the queen of Warner Brothers. Joan had parted ways with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and she did leave on her own accord. The movie Mommy Dearest falsely has a scene that implies she was fired from Metro. The big scene where she goes, leave Metro, but no, she left on her own accord. It was a mutual agreement, and she didn't work for a couple of years, and then she was signed with Warner Brothers. And of course, Betty was the reigning queen of the studio, and she wasn't too happy about Joan coming over. And Joan claimed that she wanted to do a movie with Betty back in the 1940s. She wanted to do a film of Ethan Frome, the novel, and she wanted Raymond Massey to do it with him. She thought there were 2 roles that would be perfect for them, but Betty just did not want to work with Joan, and she poo-pooed the idea. Now, this is where it gets into some tawdry rumors, but it has been written before that Joan was quite bisexual and supposedly had a crush on Betty. I read an account of this where she was sending flowers and candy and notes to Betty's dressing room, and Betty would just send them right back. Like, leave me alone. I'm not interested in you. So that created more hard feelings, but they worked together, of course, famously in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And this is covered in the movie Feud, and it does seem to be accurate. Both actresses' careers were in the dumps. They were both in their 50s. Shall we just say night had fallen on their day in their careers. They had not had a hit film in a long, long time. And Joan wisely knew that while nobody cared about them individually, together, their names together on a marquee would still have box office magic. There'd be a lot of interest. And it was Joan who called Betty's attention to Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and said, this is just perfect for us and we should work together. But she approached her with that, our names don't matter much, but together they will. And it turned out Joan was right, because Whatever Happened to Baby Jane was a smash hit movie. It was really the last major hit either actress ever had at the box office. And you want to know about the strife. A lot of that happened after Baby Jane. What really finished things. Betty was nominated for a Best Actress Oscar, and Joan was not nominated. And Joan went on a campaign. She was living in New York at the time, and she was calling up all of the nominated New York actors, such as Anne Bancroft, who ended up winning. and said, if you can't make it to the Oscars, I will be more than thrilled to come on stage and accept the Oscar on your behalf. And she also just, frankly, according to Betty, called up a lot of people, even in Hollywood, to persuade them not to vote for Betty Davis. And Betty Davis was embittered by this. There are clips of her on shows like Johnny Carson in the 80s saying how Joan Crawford cost her the Oscar. And she said how, according to Betty, it was stupid, how stupid it was, because a Best Actress win would have meant like another $1 million at the box office. And she and Joan Crawford had royalties from the movie. I'm trying to think of the correct word for it. I won't say residuals. That's not the right word, royalties, but the profit participation. They would have made a lot more money had Betty had won the Oscar, but Joan, it was more of a case of pride. And so that's what happens. So anyway, I hope I summed it up. The big differences between Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. And I think I did that in about 10 minutes or less. Okay. Let's see. Great Betty Davis impression. Betty Davis was a lot of fun. She was so over the top. I've told some of my Betty stories on here because she was my, hey, paperback writer. Thank you for joining on here. I've told the stories of how Betty Davis, in a roundabout kind of sort of way, was my neighbor in West Hollywood. She lived 4 blocks down the road. And no, I never did meet Betty Davis, but I used to pass the building where she lived on one of the upper floors. It was a building called the Colonial. And I've told the story about how, I think I even told this last week, forgive me, but it does tie in here. My good friend Al Morley was a close friend of Robert Osborne, who hosted Turner Classic Movies. I'm sure you remember him. And in turn, Robert Osborne was a close friend of Betty Davis's. Now, Robert Osborne, I got to meet once. He was a really smart, fascinating man. But because of that connection, I used to plead with Al, can't you set up something where I can meet Betty Davis? Please, oh, please, oh, please. I'd love to meet Betty Davis. And Al's response was always, you don't want to meet that mean old neurotic woman. Trust me, you don't want to meet her. It will shatter you. You will be so disappointed if you meet her. And my stance was always, well, can't you let me determine that for myself? Let me meet her. I'll take my chances on it. Yes, Kate, I knew that. Betty Davis, I've seen it. I've seen the little nameplate. Her name is still engraved. It says B. Davis, as you're going in the doorway there. Yeah, that's true. I heard rumor that for a time, Jodie Foster lived in that apartment. I don't know if that's true or not, but Betty Davis was there. She had come out here. She wanted to live in LA again. I think she'd been on the East Coast for a long time and came out here. And I guess she didn't want to be bothered with a home. It was just easier for her to live in an apartment. And I'm sure it was very nice. I'm sure it was probably like the entire floor. It wouldn't surprise me. I heard she was a bit chagrined because she was right on the Sunset Strip. It was, I think it was Havenhurst and Sunset is where the building was. And it's my understanding that, to Betty's chagrin, out her front window, she had a direct view of a McDonald's in the parking lot. And I don't think she was too pleased about that. Her assistant, Catherine, I can't think of her last name, but it's Catherine, wrote a lovely book called Miss D and Me. Really a beautiful portrait of Betty Davis in her final years and what it was like to live with her there in the Colonial building. And, she goes into detail about Betty's strokes, her mastectomy, her subsequent strokes, her battle to recover. Betty's greatest fear was that she would never be able to work again. Her her acting was her life, and that was her motivation to get well again and to recover from the stroke. But then, of course, her daughter, B.D. Hyman, wrote a really cruel book. I mean, at least when Christina Crawford wrote Mommy Dearest, it came out after Joan's death. This was while Betty was still living. So it was really, really vicious, and it just destroyed Betty Davis, broke her heart beyond belief. Betty ended up disinheriting BD and gave a sizable chunk of her fortune to Catherine. And she felt that Catherine had been more of a daughter to her than her own birth daughter. But it was just awful. And, you know, speaking of Mommy Dearest, I read that shortly before Joan died, she was aware. She was aware of Mommy Dearest. She was aware that Christina was going to publish that book. And Joan was so ill at the time, she couldn't fight back. But she knew her reputation was about to be destroyed. And it's a shame that Joan wasn't around to at least defend herself and give her side. I know there's great controversy about Mommy Dearest, but I knew Ellen Corby, who played Grandma Walton. I've talked about that before on her, and on here I've talked about it. And her partner Stella. They were. It's no secret. It's well known that Ellen was gay, and Stella was her partner. I knew them both lovely, lovely people. I thought the world of them. And you know, when I knew Ellen, it was years after her stroke. She never fully recovered from the stroke that she had while she was doing the Waltons. She still had one of those 3-pronged walkers, you know, and her ability to speech was limited. But Ellen was so expressive with her eyes, her hands, and she and Stella had a telepathy. Remember, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Piano with Holly Hunter and Anna Paquin, when Anna Paquin was a little girl and the little girl could communicate for her mute mother. It was almost like that, the way Stella could communicate and talk on behalf of Ellen. But anyway, Ellen, through Stella, told me that Joan Crawford was not like that. That just, according to Ellen Corby, that book was a work of fiction. It was viciously cruel. She knew Joan Crawford to be a lovely, lovely, lovely woman. And she really strived to be a good mother. You know, she had her flaws. Now, I know there are people who give the other side, who had other stories, but that was just what I heard firsthand from Ellen Corby. And I know also Myrna Loy in her autobiography came to Joan Crawford's defense and said similar things. But anyway, I'm just looking at some comments here. Yeah. Yeah, darn it. Andy's saying, how can you think bad of McDonald's? I don't know. I think it was just the aesthetics outside her window. Because, you know, where Betty lived, right there on the Sunset Strip, you know, there are also the mountains and the Hollywood Hills. And I don't think she liked having her view marred. But anyway, yeah, Jim, you're saying, I loved Ellen. She was such a great actress. Yes, she was. You know, I adored her as a kid growing up watching the Waltons, because she was so real. She was so multidimensional. And I knew women like her when I was growing up. And I loved the Waltons because I loved, well, also from Virginia, you know, the countryside and all. And I really identified with John Boy, the writer, you know, wanting to go to New York, wanting to pursue an artistic career. That was very much me when I was growing up. And I got to have these conversations with Ellen in the 1990s, you know, about the show and what it had meant to me. And she said that she still got fan mail from people all over the world. And sometimes she'd even be crying about it, because Ellen was very old school, you know, about answering letters by hand, you know, giving personal replies to everyone. And so she wanted very much to answer each letter, but because of her stroke, you know, she had limited mobility with her hand, and it was hard. And sometimes Stella told me this, she'd be up late at night struggling to write those letters. But that mattered to her because she was very much that old school, you answered correspondence. And I think she really appreciated it because up until the Waltons, she'd always been a character actress who worked a lot, but she'd never been really famous in her own right. This was her first real taste of stardom. And speaking of the Emmys, she won 3 Emmys for playing Grandma Walton. Just brilliant. And of course, the great irony, Will Geer. Yes, I know he had children, he had a wife, but yes, he was also gay. So Grandma and Grandpa Walton, I think a lot of the country at the time would have been shocked to have known the truth of the actors playing them, but they were marvelous in what they did. And Will Geer, there's a wonderful theater in Topanga Canyon, outdoor theater that still is in operation. I think his daughter Ellen Geer, she runs it to this very day. I've been there for a few productions. Jim, I remember that from the moment the Waltons premiered. Thursday nights at 8 p.m. were must see. Yeah. There was a period, I think the Waltons was like the 2nd or 3rd highest rated show on television. In fact, what was interesting, that I don't know if you remember the Flip Wilson show. The Flip Wilson show was a major hit, and the Waltons came on and completely dethroned the show. And I think it ended up being canceled after about a year. And I've seen interviews with Michael Learned where she was just she was a struggling actress at the time. She had done a lot of stage. She had a lot of background in Shakespeare and in classics, and she really wasn't interested in doing television other than she needed the paycheck. She needed to work. And she said that when she was called in to test for the role, she thought her screen test was just nothing. In fact, it was like a year or 2 later, she was on, I think, the Dinah Shore's show or something, and they played her screen test, and she got to watch it again. And she said, I still don't know how they cast me in the role. I, honest to God, do not know how I got cast on that show. She said, I was too young for the part, for one thing. Here she was playing the mother of 7 children, the oldest being 17. She was only like 31, 32 years old at the time. And she said her hair was short. They had to put hair pieces on her and stuff. And to her amazement, she got cast in the role. And she said at the time she had her sons, and she had left her husband, and they were living in a motel. And that show just changed her life in so many ways, and it brought her fame she was never expecting to have. Gave her a whole career. And of course, I told this before, but Ellen Corby, this was when I knew her was in the 90s, and the Waltons had been off the air for more than it went off like 1981 or something. It had been off the air for many years, but she said the actors who played the family had remained extremely close. They were very much a part of each other's lives, weddings, funerals, getting together for Thanksgiving, Christmas. She said it was like they all had a second family, and that bond remained. And it's from my understanding that bond is still very much there with all the surviving cast members. Let's see. And Ed Flanders, St. Elsewhere. Oh, he was really good on that show. I remember Ed Flanders once played Harry Truman. It was something on PBS in the 70s. I can't remember what it was called, but I remember he was just marvelous as Harry Truman. Jim talking about Flip Wilson here. Yes, the Josephine character. What you see is what you get, honey. Flip Wilson was such a talent, and the devil made me do it. Oh, Valerie, thank you, Chuck. Must help Mom get in bed now. Well, thank you, Valerie, for joining. Thank you so very much. And I'm sure I'll be doing Anastasia's show again. We keep talking about how she wants me to be a guest on there again. I know I will be, just like she's been a guest on here many times. Oh, Danny, you've been binge watching a show with Jim Carrey called The Duck Factory. You know, I vaguely remember that show. That was like one of the first things Jim Carrey ever did. But I didn't. Let's see. You said you're binge watching. At first, I thought, well, maybe it's being streamed somewhere. But you said you have it on VHS. The Duck Factory. Yeah, it lasted about half a season, as I recall. It was about an animation studio, hence the Duck Factory. I think they animated like obviously not Donald Duck, but it was something like that. You know, I'd have to watch it again. Maybe there's some episodes on YouTube. Reruns of which aired for one night only on Nick at Night, April 1st, 1990. You know, I'm surprised it hasn't been revived more, just simply because of Jim Carrey. You know, Chris, Jim Carrey, I don't know if he's retired now or what. I can't recall when I last saw him do a movie or work on anything. You know, he seems to have faded a little bit from the public consciousness. Jim saying, yes, the Duck Factory, Dippy Duck. The Boyfriend Killer. Yeah, Flip Wilson. I don't think they ever showed Killer, the boyfriend. I think he was just alluded to. And he never heard of the Duck Factory. Well, a lot of people wouldn't, because it was way back in the early 80s, and it was on just for about 13 episodes. But you got me curious now, because I think Jim Carrey is a genius. He's somebody I'd love to meet. Oh, hi, Sydney. Thank you for joining. I don't know. A lot of... Oh, look who decided to make a cameo. I don't think she wants... Okay. She's turning away. I changed my mind. I'm shy. I don't want to be on camera. Okay, maybe she'll... Oh, okay, Sasha. Here we go. Okay. I don't think she wants to be on the show, but we're going to... Here's Sasha. Come on, face the camera. Just say hello to people for a moment. Say hello. She's saying, stop that. Stop that. Oh, anyway, here's my little girl. No, she actually loves when I hold her tight and squeeze her. And I made the mistake once of doing that on one of my videos. It was perfectly innocent. Sasha just loves me to squeeze her and hold her tight. And I got comments from people saying, you're abusing your cat. You're hurting your cat. How dare you? How dare you? And I was like, oh, well, it's all in optics, but I think I would never do anything to hurt my Sasha. I love her. Yes, I love my Sasha. I love my little blue-eyed Siamese princess. She is adorable. And she's sweet. Okay, she's letting me hold her right now. Let's see how long this lasts. Joyce, when you start doing your show again, you're going to have to bring out your kitty. Maybe we can do a show together with our cats and hold them up. Yeah, Jim, thank you for saying that. Yes, it was absurd. But, there's a lot of negativity out there. Whenever you do a YouTube thing like this, you are putting yourself out there and you're exposing yourself, and there will be those people who make comments. But that one rattled me, because that's the last thing in the world I would ever do. And it really hurt me. We're not supposed to be hurt. We're not supposed to take comments like that personally. Yeah, when you say I'm hurting my cat, come on, please. No, that's not going to happen. But anyway, what's the time here? 6:44. I've got to watch my time here, because I do not want to compete with my friend Anastasia. I do not want this to be Joan Crawford and Betty Davis or B. Arthur. Betty White. I do not compete. I like to give support and encouragement. Quite the opposite. Oh, Jim, you have cats too? Yeah, something, my sister doesn't like cats. She's actually said to me, "Oh, I don't know what you like that damn cat for. What do you like cats for?" And I'm like, what's not to love about a cat? Of course, it's like, say that as Sasha has just run off somewhere to go destroy something in my kitchen. Sydney, are we talking about Golden Girls? Oh, yeah, we talked about that earlier in the show. I gave a lot of information that I knew, told about the time that I sat in the audience for a I have cat hair on me. Golden Palace taping, how Rue McClanahan used to come to my apartment building, and she admitted to me that the four of them did not get along too well on the show, but they were professional and they worked extremely well together. I have two boy cats, an orange and a white, and an all black cat. Oh, that's sweet. I'd love to have more cats. I just don't think Sasha would ever let me. She makes it abundantly clear to me that this is her home and I am her possession, and she does not want to share me with anybody else. She gives that energy off. But yeah, we were talking about Golden Girls earlier. I think I told all the stories that I had. Andy, 7 cats. That sounds like me no, it wasn't last week. It was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was cat sitting. 2 cats for one neighbor and 4 cats for another, and then my own cat. So I had 7 cats in my life for a while. Oh, Anastasia, you joined me. Wow. I have you on here. I hope you heard me give you a plug. She's on here saying, see you soon. Little kissy. Yes, please, all of you. Let's see, because it is 6:46. I'm going to have to sign off soon. Sorry, I have cat hair. But as I always say on here, please come over and join my dear beloved friend Anastasia Pavlov, who does a marvelous live stream of her own, and she's taken it in her own exciting directions and put her own imprint on here. YouTube will never be the same. And so I'm always appreciative when all of you come over to her show, and I know it means the world to her as well. And everybody's saying hello to each other. And Andy said, you don't need makeup, you're already beautiful. And I agree. And Anastasia is saying, time for naughty fairy tales. You go in directions I don't go. But I know you're going to have fun with her. And we jokingly say that Monday nights are the double feature, because it's like I get you all warmed up for Anastasia, so you can go over to her. But I'm so proud of her. I'm so proud of her, what she's accomplishing and building. And really, she takes this a lot more seriously than I do, because I just kind of come on here and have a little fun with you guys. I have a whole archive of videos. I have something like 800 videos, but last time I made a new one was about a year ago. So I need to get back to that, but I do this live stream. And I've been focusing really a lot of my energy on the 2 shows I do with Dr. Whimsy Anderson, because we have a much bigger audience there. We got over 18,000 viewers last week. And it was a show that was it was a bit controversial. It was a bit of a tightrope walk for me, because we had to talk about some tragic events in the news. And I even hate to bring them up here, but we had to talk about it. But we got over 18,000 people. And that's a much bigger audience than I ever get here. So that's where I focus a lot of my energy. Check back to the drawing board. Thank you, friends. Need to warm up my pine cone. Ooh. Well, I'm not going to touch that line. Wait, what have I got here? Hold on. Anastasia is still watching. She painted this pine cone for me. And the color is not really registering as well as it should on camera here, but it's a beautiful maroon red. And I don't even know if I ever told her that was my favorite color. But she intuitively, because she's extremely intuitive, painted the pine cone that color. And this was one of the gifts she gave me for my birthday. Whoa, how? Why don't I show my other birthday gift from her? Here we go. Wrote a lovely note on the back. I won't share it's personal, but she gave me this beautiful painting, this beautiful frame, and I cherish it very much. And I'm happy I can show it to you now. I guess, I don't know if Anastasia is still there, but anyway, these are my 2 birthday gifts this year. I did have a nice birthday balloon, but that got popped by Sasha. So I don't have it anymore. But we're very, very close friends, and we love working together. And I'm sure she will either be on here or I will be on her show very soon. And it's 6:50, so I should wrap this up. Did anybody have a closing comment or question for me, or shall I just sign out now at 6:50 to give everybody a break before Anastasia's show, so you can go over there and join her? And just, of course, going to remind you once again that I do on the Oracle of Whimsy channel a show called Taco Tuesdays with the wonderful Dr. Whimsy Anderson. And yes, Andy, you had a question? What's your question? Oh, actually a joke. When is that? I'll wait for you to appear here. So while I'm waiting on that to appear, okay. Knock, knock. Who's there? Who's there? Alpaca? Did I say that right? Alpaca who? Alpaca the trunk. You paca the suitcase. Yeah, I think you did. So anyway, thank you, Andy. So anyway, I was just going to say that I do Whimsy show on Tuesdays and now Thursdays, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Check us out. We have a lot of fun together too, because Whimsy and I go back. We had a professional relationship that grew into a close friendship, and now we just capitalize upon it. When she and I get together, it's just like the two of us back in the days when we would talk at work, and 2 professional adults who would get in trouble with the bosses for talking too much. We would be chided like we were in kindergarten, and we get to joke about that now because now we get to talk all we want. Andy, we'll check one more thing in making you a neat little gift. Where can I send it to when it's done? Well, I can let you know privately. I don't know if I want to get my address out publicly. Here, I can do it privately. Let's see. They're nutting like birds of a feather. Oh, yeah. Like birds of a feather. Cuckoo. Cuckoo bird. In fact, when I was making jokes about the Emmy Couture last night, there were a lot of women wearing feathers, and I made some snide little comments about how it's interesting that you can take feather dusters and create couture. Anyway, I better sign out here because I want to get ready for Anastasia's show, and I just thank you all very much for joining here. It means a lot to me, and I'll be here next week to be with you again. Okay, I'm going to say goodnight for now. Bye-bye.